Most people think history's worst disasters began with failure, a mistake, a breakdown, a moment where control slipped. That belief is intuitive. It's also comforting, because if a catastrophe only happens when systems fail, then systems that function must be safe. But almost none of history's worst disasters began that way. They began when everything looked normal. Ships sailed on schedule. Cities functioned as expected. Markets cleared. Institutions did their jobs. Nothing appeared broken. And that's precisely why the danger went unnoticed. History's deadliest moments didn't come from chaos. They came from confidence. From the belief that because something had worked yesterday, it would work tomorrow. From the assumption that stability was proof of safety. From systems that mistook continuity for resilience. In finance, this is what happens when risk is priced as routine instead of treated as a liability. When you look closely at history, a different pattern emerges. The rules were followed. The standards were met. The risks were documented. Nothing broke. The system worked. And that's exactly why it was dangerous.
Every system is built on assumptions. Not guesses, not hopes, assumptions. Assumptions about how people behave, about how often rare events occur, about how much stress the system can absorb before it breaks. These assumptions are not hidden. They are embedded in design decisions, policies, budgets, and models. As long as reality stays within those assumptions, the system appears stable, and stability is seductive because it looks like proof. But stability doesn't mean safety. It only means the system hasn't yet been tested beyond its design limits. History's worst disasters didn't come from chaos or ignorance. They came from moments when reality crossed a line the system never planned for. The danger wasn't invisible. It wasn't ignored. It was misunderstood. The system believed it understood the world because its assumptions had held so far. That belief is the first failure. Because assumptions are not truths. They are shortcuts. They simplify a complex world into something manageable. And when the world changes faster than those assumptions, the system has no warning mechanism left. It doesn't fail loudly. It fails decisively. Assumptions don't vanish. They harden. At first, they're treated as provisional, something to be monitored, something to revisit. Then they're treated as reliable. They've held long enough to be trusted. Eventually, they stop being treated as assumptions at all. They become reality. This doesn't happen because people stop thinking. It happens because systems reward continuity. If nothing breaks, there is pressure to optimize. If stress doesn't appear, safeguards feel excessive. If risk doesn't materialize, carrying it feels inefficient. So margins shrink. Buffers are trimmed. Redundancy is labeled as waste. In finance, this process is well understood. Risk is not eliminated, it is discounted. Models are calibrated to recent history. Calm periods are extended forward. Rare events are assigned lower probabilities because they haven't happened lately. The absence of loss is mistaken for the absence of danger. Exposure feels affordable, not because it's small, but because it hasn't been punished yet. Over time, the system stops asking the hard question, what happens if this assumption is wrong? Instead, it asks an easier one, what worked last time? That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because once a system is optimized around past conditions, it loses flexibility. It can't absorb shock. It can't improvise. It can't respond creatively. So when conditions finally change, the system doesn't adapt, it snaps. Not because it was careless, but because it was never built to operate outside the assumptions it stopped seeing. Every system survives by staying inside its assumptions. The moment reality steps outside them, the outcome is not gradual, it's decisive. Pompeii rested on a simple assumption. Those tremors were harmless. The ground had shaken before, buildings still stood, life continued. The city didn't ignore danger, it learned the wrong lesson from survival. Each tremor reinforced the belief that an eruption was unlikely. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, reality didn't introduce a new risk.
It violated an old assumption, and the system had no response. Ireland's food system rested on a different assumption, that a single crop could sustain a population indefinitely. The math worked, until it didn't. When blight struck, the system didn't collapse from confusion. It functioned exactly as designed. Food flowed outward, contracts were enforced, exports continued. The assumption wasn't that people wouldn't starve, it was that the system didn't exist to stop it. Nazi Germany's bureaucracy rested on another assumption, that obedience could be separated from consequence. Classification felt administrative, compliance felt neutral. Each step seemed procedural, temporary, necessary. The system scaled efficiently because it was never designed to question its purpose. When violence accelerated, the structure didn't break, it performed. The assumption wasn't that harm wouldn't occur, it was that responsibility could be distributed so that no one owned it. Bhopal's industrial system relied on a final assumption, that redundant safeguards would never all fail at once. Each layer removed reduced the cost. Each shortcut felt justified. Nothing happened until everything did. When reality arrived, it arrived all at once. Different domains, different centuries, same failure mode. The systems didn't collapse because they were weak. They collapsed because reality exceeded the assumptions they were built to survive. It's tempting to believe these failures belong to the past, that better technology, better data, and better coordination fixed the problem. They didn't. They changed its shape. Modern systems are not built on fewer assumptions. They're built on more. Complexity doesn't eliminate risk, it hides it. As systems grow larger and more efficient, they rely on tighter margins and narrower tolerances. Redundancy becomes expensive. Flexibility becomes inefficient. Resilience looks like waste. So it gets optimized away. In finance, this is familiar. Liquidity is assumed because it usually exists. Correlations are trusted because they held last time. Stress scenarios are trimmed because they feel unlikely. The system performs beautifully, right up until it doesn't. And when modern assumptions fail, the failure is not contained, it cascades. Supply chains snap in sequence. Institutions freeze simultaneously. Failures propagate faster than responses. Modern systems don't break slowly, they flip states. Stable to unstable, liquid to frozen, contained to systemic. The irony is simple. The more efficient a system becomes, the less margin it has for being wrong, and the more catastrophic the consequences are when it is. Across centuries, technologies, and ideologies, every disaster followed the same sequence. Not chaos, no surprise, not ignorance. Assumptions were made, they held. They stopped being questioned until reality stepped outside them. That's the common thread. The systems didn't fail because they were reckless. They failed because they were precise. They optimized for the world they expected, not the one that arrived. Efficiency replaced margin. Compliance replaced judgment. Stability replaced skepticism. Risk wasn't denied, it was priced. And once risk is priced instead of challenged, failure becomes a matter of timing. Disasters are not the result of one bad decision. They are the result of many correct decisions made under the same flawed assumptions. Each one is reasonable. Each one is defensible. Each one reinforces the model until the model breaks.
So the question isn't whether disaster can be prevented. It's whether assumptions are ever challenged before they're tested. Because history shows a consistent pattern. By the time a system admits it might be wrong, it's already too late to change it. That's why collapse feels sudden. Not because it arrives quickly, but because the margin to respond was consumed quietly over time. Every safeguard was optimized away. Every warning was reclassified as unlikely. Every close call is treated as confirmation, until the system becomes perfectly efficient at surviving only one version of reality, and fatally unprepared for the next. History doesn't repeat itself. It repeats assumptions, and the most dangerous assumption of all is believing we'll recognize the moment they fail. So the real question isn't what history got wrong,
It's this: which assumptions are holding everything together right now, and what happens if they're wrong?